Well, welcome everybody. It's nice to be here with you all. Yeah, good to see you. A quick announcement. I have a retreat planned for June 25th through the 27th. It's online, so it's available to everyone. And I really want you to join us for this. When we're on this path of Kundalini Awakening, it can be quite lonely and it can be overwhelming. And retreat is a time to really say yes to God, to say I'm willing to put my life on the line. I'm willing to give of myself and to surrender deeply. I struggled with immense Kundalini pain for the good part of, 8 or 10 years. And, I really struggled with what this pain was about. And I can remember I was just really struggling with resistance and, just all this tension in the body. And, I just looked to my teacher, and there was 2 retreats that were available back to back. And, it just happened to be that I went on all the retreats. So it's my teacher, but there was something about just saying yes to that challenge. And afterwards, the Kundalini broke free. And I experienced enormous relief, enormous relief from just that pent up tension. Through the willingness to say, yes, I'm willing to make this a lifestyle, not just a hobby, this spiritual path. I'm willing to make it my lifestyle. I'm willing to give everything. And after that moment, every time I went on retreat, I felt just a deepening of surrender and a deepening of integration with the Kundalini. Started to greatly fall into place. And so some people on the path of Kundalini, they get scared of, stepping into retreat. And I encourage you not to have fear. There's no doubt that the energies will intensify. There's no doubt about that. But we have to remember that we're surrendering into God. We're surrendering into a new life. We're not surrendering, into just eternal pain or pressure and intensity. Eventually it will straighten itself out. And sometimes when you really say to God, look, I'm going to give you a block of time just to work on me. In the same way, if you had a cavity, the dentist needs a block of time, so she can go in there and, work on your teeth and get them all straightened out, get them fixed up. And so I encourage you, to think about joining if you feel called. Okay, so that's the first announcement. So this week's teaching is that Kundalini is a rite of passage on the spiritual path. It's a rite of passage. And so basically that means it's a step, a great step, where you're going from the known, like your egoic known identity, into the unknown. And it very much follows the archetypal hero's journey. And when you know this, and when you have a model for Kundalini Awakening as the hero's journey, when you have a map of what's coming or what's happening, it takes a lot of the confusion out of the process. Because, if one day you're just sitting there and all of a sudden you have all this energy and intensity and vibration, and maybe your third eye is being blown open and you're seeing things, and then you're facing anxiety and darkness and confusion and the unconscious within you. If you have no map of what's happening, you might be like, oh my God, I'm going crazy. Like I'm losing my mind, literally. But when you look at this journey archetypally, that it has an intelligence. It has a beginning and a flow, through multiple steps and an end. It begins to make much more sense what's happening here. And then for those of you who don't know about the hero's journey, I'm going to walk through the steps. And so basically, if most of us have seen Star Wars and Luke Skywalker, he went on the archetypal a hero's journey. That's the modern story, the hero's journey. But this journey, it's been in the human psyche for thousands of years. Where you start where you're at. You're just a normal human being living a normal, mundane life. And then somewhere from deep within, you feel this call to adventure. And a call to adventure may be you just getting a book about God, a book about meditation, a book about yoga. You say, what is that? And you start to study this. And this is where you begin, to leave your home. You begin to leave your normal everyday samsaric consciousness. And, for most of us, that book or that teacher, it was dropped in our lap. Like we had the idea of, wanting a teacher, wanting this, or wanting a greater life. And then maybe out of nowhere, we just come across a book and it's just dropped in our lap. It's left on our doorstep. Maybe someone leaves it on our seat at desk, say, or our seat, at the office, or, a friend or family member just says, hey, I was thinking about you. I want to give you this book. Maybe you just stumble into a Kundalini yoga or meditation class. But when you look back at it, you see, oh no, God put me here. God dropped me into this. For one reason or another, God heard our call to adventure, to a greater life, to a greater life. And at some point we open the book and we begin to go over this threshold. Again, from the world of the known, like I know who I am, what my life is about, from an egoic perspective. I'm just living a simple egoic life. It's about getting rich and having children and buying a sports car or whatever, being successful, having 10 million Instagram followers, whatever it is. But then we pick up that first book on yoga and we say, oh no, it's not about that. It's about something much greater. And so we step into the unknown. And as we step into the unknown and truly begin to walk forward, oftentimes a teacher comes forward of some sort. A teacher, a guide, a helper. Oh, maybe we go on our first retreat or whatever it is. We say, oh, there's something great here. And so we start to dive more deeply into the path. And as we do so, maybe the Kundalini is activated, in our case. And this is where we're challenged. We're challenged by the intensity of energy, the intensity of grace. And our ego may say, oh, this is too much. I want to go back. And many of us on the path have said this. I want to go back. I want to go back. But because you've stepped over the threshold, the point of no return, God says no. There is no going back for you. There is only going forward. And in that moment, the ego really clamps down and says, isn't there another way for me to go back? Isn't there a way that I could just numb myself, whether through drugs or alcohol, or through chasing desire, or through, going back to my family or living with mom and dad? Can I just reconnect with that old girlfriend or boyfriend? But you try to go back and you realize, no, that it doesn't work. This will not satisfy me. I've seen that there's something greater. And so you'll hear, your heart will call you forward saying, no, I must go forward. But the ego says, I want to go back. I want to go back. And if you have a really strong ego, it might try to resist, it might try to fight. And because the presence of God is flowing through you in the form of Kundalini, there's no going back. And at some point we get blasted into the abyss where we literally face death and rebirth. And by death, it's the death of the old you. And then the new you, the true you, is being reborn into matter, into form. And there's this great transformation that takes place when you begin to face the unconsciousness and you meet it with love. When you face the fear or the anxiety or the doubt or the confusion or whatever the shadow is, you face it and you meet it with love. Then you reach deep within and you find this greater strength. And as you do so, true healing happens, true transformation happens. And oftentimes this is referred to as atonement, where you've forgiven yourself, you forgive others, and something greater is moving through you. So it's not the same old egoic defended heart. There's this deeper heart that you discover, a heart of compassion, a heart of strength, a heart of power, a mind which is spacious and vast and free. And then from this place, we are invited back into the world to share our gift, and to share our strength, our truth, our heart, our love. And so this process, it's truly a process of fire. It's a process of fire. That's what Kundalini is. It's fire, it's heat, it's intensity. And so as this Kundalini wakes up in you, again, the ego will say, no, I do not like this. This is too much. I'm not in control. I can't control this. Let's get rid of this. Let's stop this. But again, once you pass the threshold of opening to it, you can't stop God's intelligence. You can't stop it. You can't kill it. You can't extinguish the fire. The question is can you jump into the fire and allow your physicality to be transformed, your mentality to be transformed, your emotionality to be transformed, and inviting something much greater to flow through you. So instead of the consciousness of ego, the consciousness of God is what we're inviting forward. Now, an hour ago, I was speaking with our friend in the Sangha, Matan, and he's from Israel, and right now his country is at war. And he and I were speaking, and he said, it's such an animalistic way to live. This hatred and bombing each other, wanting to kill each other. And he was saying there's got to be a better way to do life. We were talking, that, even though he's Israeli, comes from the Jewish heritage. I looked at him. I said, "Well, you look kind of Muslim." He said, "Yeah, we all look alike here. The Jews and the Palestinians, we all look alike. We look just like people. We look like people." Like when I was in India, people kept asking me if I was from Iran, if I was Muslim. I thought, "Oh no, do I look Muslim?" And a Muslim and a Jew looks like a person. Just looks like a person, a human being. And see, Kundalini is inviting us to step into the fire and allow the fight or flight consciousness, the animal consciousness, to be burnt, to be cooked out of us, and to invite God consciousness, which is universal, which is unity-based, which doesn't see division. But in the place of division, there is love. And so I encourage you, for those of you struggling, those of you wanting to go back, I encourage you to have an accurate map that you've stepped over the threshold. There is no going back on the Kundalini journey. We're only going forward, and you will be challenged, but through the challenge, something much greater will come. Through the challenge, you begin to realize that you are not a small human, flesh organism. You're not an animal organism. You're a divine being. That's what you are. The only way we discover that is through walking through the fire and realizing, oh, I didn't get burned. The fire did not kill me. It actually gave birth to me. And so anyways, so nice to have you all today. Again, I'm going to invite you, for those of you who showed up late, to join us on our June retreat, where we'll really step into this fire and invite this greater truth and this light and love to live through us as our very nature. As our very nature. A quick, one more quick announcement is I put some homework or a list of questions for you on the Kundalini Facebook page. Basically asking, how are you meeting this journey? How are you meeting this hero's journey? This transformative journey? How have you surrendered? How have you failed? And we'll all fail. That's part of the journey. Failure creates humility. But it also gives us the opportunity to look deep, deep within. And how have you been triumphant and stepped into something greater, these greater aspects of God consciousness? So I encourage you after the group to go over to the Kundalini Facebook page and just share of yourself. Share of yourself. Let's just take a moment, and if anyone else wants to share or ask a question, you can raise your hand, but I'm going to invite everyone here just to gently close your eyes and invite a great love to shine from the goodness of your heart throughout the Sangha. Blessing Laura, blessing Valerie, blessing Hans, blessing Ivy, blessing all of us here who could use a little support. Blessing all of us here. So just breathing in and breathing out and just shining your light out in all directions. So if any of you need more light or support, please soak it up. And I encourage you, when we're done today, use the Kundalini Support group page on Facebook to reach out to each other, to speak to each other. And there's a couple of things, I'd like to speak about, just commenting on what many of you said or responding to. And it's something beautiful that actually Chris brought up, and welcome, Chris. It's nice to have you here, new face in the group. And Chris was saying, I'm feeling pretty good. I feel like I have my life together, don't have a lot of trauma and this or that. But I feel this terror, this panic attacks, coming through my body. Valerie said she felt this sense of rage. A number of people said, I felt suicidal or at my wit's end. I don't have anything else within me to respond. And see, this is the part of the hero's journey where you're thrown into the death and the rebirth section. Where it's like, I feel like I'm dying. I feel like my ego doesn't have what it takes to respond to life. Even if it's a really good, solid, healthy ego, or an ego that's just been beaten and abused by life, it doesn't matter. What Kundalini does, what this journey does, is it takes you to the point where you can't find any resource within you to how do I respond to this? And when we get to this point, oftentimes the mind will get suicidal or it'll just get perplexed. Like, I don't know what this existential fear or panic or rage is about. And here's where we have the opportunity to step into a non-dual orientation where instead of looking to your ego for support or for strength or for wisdom or for knowledge or for teachings or skillful means, if we're a good Buddhist or whatever it is, surrendering all that and taking one more step more fully into the unknown. I call this reaching deep within and discovering something greater, a non-dual response to rage, a non-dual response to existential fear or panic. And a non-dual response means you join wholeheartedly, like you jump into the rage. It's the opposite thing that the superego would do. Superego says, no, I'm not going to go into that. If I jump into rage, I'll probably start, killing people or, chopping off heads or killing myself or whatever. But I encourage you to jump off the cliff into the rage, into the fear, into the panic, and see what comes forward. See what comes forward, to jump into the fire. And as you jump into the fire, let the mind be burned up. Like let the thoughts be burnt up. Don't join with the thought. Jump into a very direct experiential relationship with fear. And as you do so, fear transforms into excitement. Panic transforms into just pure energy, pure light. Rage transforms into pure power. And it will do so as long as you do not think. So when you're thinking, you're grasping at, egoic identities of rage is bad, fear is bad, panic is bad. I don't like it. I need to micromanage it. So I'm inviting you all, when you come to this threshold, surrender deeply and fully and see if there's something greater at play here as you experience it directly. As you do so, as you join me in this step, you step into the realm of enlightenment. But if you try to step into the fire of rage and you reference your thinking mind, you'll say, I'm angry about this and this shouldn't be happening. And I want to, excuse my language, but fucking kill someone. And that, that'll be the marker that you're in your egoic identity. Whereas when you step into rage and experience it directly without ego, there'll be more of a sense of like, oh my God, there is so much power and energy moving through my body. There's so much power and energy moving through my body. And so many years ago, I started to experience great panic, just great overwhelming. I was just having panic attacks. And I chose to lay down on the ground and just let go of all of my mind, let go of all of, any referencing in the mind of whether this is good or bad, there's something psychologically wrong with Craig, and just let panic move through my body. And as I did so, I opened into the realm of oneness. And I realized, oh, this is something quite incredible. So these are immense tantric doorways, whether it's rage or fear or, feeling like, we wanting to kill oneself. All that is that when the ego gets pushed to a point where it says, I want to kill myself. Basically what it's saying is, I don't know how to respond to life, but I want peace. I want peace. That's what the ego is really saying. I want to step into my non-dual nature. I know there's a greater realm. If you go into thoughts, it comes up with a story of, okay, I need a rope and I need to hang myself off a bridge or whatever it is. And I say this with a smile because I'm very comfortable with thoughts of suicide. I've had so many thoughts of suicide, but I just never believed that the ego had the solution. The solution was, yes, you need to surrender and jump off the cliff into peace, into freedom, jump beyond ego. That's what this journey is about. It's about jumping beyond the known. The known. So even if you have it all sorted out, spiritually, mentally, rationally, emotionally, we're adult, we're mature. What Kundalini is inviting is for you to step beyond that. And that's a very hard thing to do. It's one thing to let go of things that aren't working. Sometimes Kundalini will invite you to let go of things that are working really well. like your spiritual identity of being a good, yoga practitioner, or a good Buddhist, or a good Christian, or a good whatever. To even step beyond that. Like, I was incredibly well trained by my teachers, but nothing could actually prepare me to step off this cliff into the immense unknown. And in a sense, Hans gave a wonderful depiction of it, of just the ego just like freaking out, and the kid just saying, like, I don't know what to do. I'm just gonna go sit in my car and put the seat back and just melt and see what happens. And see what happens. And the invitation with Kundalini is not to do that once, but to do that as a way of life. A way of life. And like what Ivy was bringing forward was just this question about freedom, where it seemed like Kundalini was serving her up a big dish of freedom. Like, here's the freedom. And then she was noticing that she was not wanting it. And so again, we all do that on this journey, as we see it and then we back away. And at some point, backing away just gets boring. We realize, like, it doesn't do anything for me to be, guarded and, taking, realigning with my safe ego. It doesn't do anything for me. We have to be a little bit of a gambler. We have to be a little bit crazy. That's one thing I always was, a little bit crazy, a little bit of a gambler. And I could say, well, just screw it. I just want to see what will happen if I walk forward naked into this realm. By naked, I mean without ego, without my thoughts, without my training, without my skillful means. What will happen if I walk forward? And in a sense, that's egoic suicide. You're saying, oh, like, that ego is not, it doesn't do it for me. Like Laura's describing, I'm at the end of my rope here. It doesn't do it for me. Can I open? Can I surrender? Can I melt? And see if something greater comes forward. And that's the challenge of enlightenment, of you're literally stepping out of the realm and stepping into a much greater realm, the realm of the unknown, where it will feel like you're free falling through space. Like if you opened a panic attack, it feels like the ground is falling out from under you. And if you open to that as a way of life, you'll walk around. Like Hans was describing, you feel like you're not touching the earth. Like the earth is falling out from under you. And it's very frightening at first. I'm not going to, lie. But then it becomes quite thrilling. Quite thrilling. And like Ivy's describing, like this is the plate that God is serving before you. Is, do you want to eat of it? Do you want to join? And sit at this table? Or do you want to sit at the table of egoic identification? And there's no judgment in there. If you choose, like, no, I want to hear my ego and, have my cake or whatever. But there's just suffering in that. You always feel like, oh, there's something more, something much more. So anyways, I thought I'd just share a little bit. And, it can come in many ways. Like God brings us to crisis many ways. Sometimes it's, like Cynthia was describing, she was doing everything right with diet and, herbalism. And she was, being a practitioner of some healing art and this and that. And then God gave her chronic illness. And it's like, oh, what's that about? Is it a punishment? No. Is it her karma? No. God is bringing her to her knees. Like God has brought all of us to our knees. And when we fall, we surrender to our knees. Do we reach towards ego? Or do we reach towards God, towards grace, towards truth, toward the unknown? And when we reach into the unknown, we're met by an immense power and force of divinity. When we reach to our ego, well, we all know how that works. We just get more of the same. We feel like we're on that, wheel of samsara, like nothing's changing here. Nothing's changing. And so anyways, if anyone else has questions or more sharing, we could have a little bit more time. So if you do, raise your hand or put it in the chat if you can't figure out the raise hand button. One last thing I'll say is we're inviting more questions, is that this hero's journey, it happens on 3 primary levels. It'll happen on the level of mind, where your egoic identification or your thinking, like rational mind, you'll have the carpet pulled out from under you, and you'll be given a new mind. Anne spoke a little bit about that, like your mind will go completely blank. You won't really know like what to do. There'll be no rationality there. And can you trust that that's a good thing, that God's reorienting you into having an empty and spacious nature? It'll happen on an emotional level, where you just become totally emotionally spent, like Laura was describing, like, gosh, I have these kids and they're just wearing me out and I give them everything and I just feel like, again, the carpet's pulled out from under you and you're invited to reach and to see if the vitality of grace can support you, where you can open to the realm of unconditional love and truth, like a radiant truth can support you and nourish you. And then it happens on the level of physicality, like what Chris was describing. Gosh, I feel really psychologically sane and emotionally healthy, but there's this terror that arises within the body, the nervous system. And so these are the 3 minds, the mental mind, the emotional mind, the mind of the physicality. And as the carpet's pulled out from under the physicality, just the basic cellular fight or flight response comes online and says, like, I'm scared. I don't even know why. I'm just existentially terrified. And that place is the most confusing because it's almost like there's no mind there. There's no like skillful means. Because the mind of the body is so radically different and it's so radically archaic. It just has a thought. If it feels good, it is good. If it feels bad, it is bad. It just contracts when we're poked. And the mind of the body has to learn how to welcome the experience of pain and fear from the perspective of trust. And sometimes with this mind, we need to do a lot of body work, where a friend of mine, a colleague of mine, she does acupuncture on horses. And so like the first time she gets out her big needles, to put them in a horse, the horse is going to freak out. It sees that needle, sees the lady come. It's like, what's going on here? And it might want to kick her. But after the horse has received acupuncture a number of times, she says she'll walk into the stable and the horse will lay down and receive the needles because it knows that through the doorway of pain, some great healing is going to occur in the body. And see, our body is, really similar. Like our mammal body is the same as a mammal body of a horse. Sometimes we have to open to pain. We have to open and receive a number of deep tissue massages before our body realizes, oh yeah, this massage table is a safe place. When you first get knots worked out, it's like, oh my God, you cry and you're drooling because it's so painful. But once the body receives it a number of times, it lays on the table and just melts and says, okay, when I receive this pain, it's actually going to open me into something greater.